Hello everybody and welcome to the final video in the Flask tutorial series where we're actually going to take this kind of minimal website that we've built and deploy this onto a Linux server, specifically using Ubuntu. Now the reason I'm doing this rather than using Heroku or something like that is because I want to show you guys how you can do this yourself just using a bare bones headless Linux server. It's probably the cheapest option for most of you if you're going to be doing website hosting. Gives you the most flexibility in terms of what you're able to do, and it's just a good skill to have. So that's what we're going to be doing today. A bulk of how I've learned to do this is actually from this website here. I would say that it's maybe a little bit outdated. There's a bunch of stuff in here we don't actually need to do. So that's why I'm not just, going to refer you directly to this page, but I will leave a link to it in the description because it has helped me learn kind of about this process. Anyways, what we're going to start by doing is just downloading some software, and then we're actually going to set up a Linux server, and we'll talk about that more in a second. We need to download PuTTY. Some of you probably already have this, but I'll leave a link to it in the description down below. It's free software. We're also going to download winSCP, which is going to allow us to do some file transfer between our computer and the Linux server that we're going to be setting up. Again, these will be linked to the description. Download that software, and then we're going to talk about Linode quickly, which is actually the sponsor of this video, and it's going to allow you guys to be hosting this website for free without having to pay for any server provider, at least while you're testing this out. So essentially, Linode has been kind enough to sponsor this video. They're going to be giving you guys $20 free credit towards your first Linux server. Now, this will actually allow you to use the most basic plan on Linode, which is $5 a month for 4 months for free. So it's awesome if you're just doing some development, testing some stuff out, whatever web apps you want to use. You don't necessarily have to make a website. You can do pretty much whatever you want with Linode. If it runs on Linux, it will run on Linode. They have an awesome support team. It's 100% human. It's 24/7. They're always willing to help you out. They've helped me out before personally. And to deploy your server, just hit the link in the description down below, and it'll give you guys, that free $20. So I'm going to click deploy my Linux server. Again, that link will be in the description. You can also use the discount code TWT19, and we're just going to set up a basic Linux server. So I'm going to go here to create a new Linode. I'm going to choose my distribution, which I'm going to pick Ubuntu for, so Ubuntu 19.10. You can also actually set these up with one-click images. Unfortunately, there's not one for a Flask application, but if you're doing something like WordPress or, I don't know, creating a Minecraft server, then you can actually just click one click. You can click these, and then everything you need will actually be installed on your server automatically, which is pretty nice. So let's go back to distributions. For regions, I need to pick Ubuntu again. So I'm just going to go the most recent version of Ubuntu, but you guys can pick whatever you want. For regions, pick whatever you want. I'm closest to Toronto, so I'm just going to pick Toronto, Ontario. But again, they have all these different data centers that you can choose from. Okay, so for the plans, I'm going to recommend to you guys that you don't need anything crazy here. Again, you have your free $20 credit, so I would just go with the most basic plan, which is Nanode 1 GB. You can see how much it costs per hour. It's literally like fractions of a cent. And then for the name, I'm just going to call this a test because, well, this is going to be a test for us right now. For the password of our server, make sure you guys remember this. Mine's weak, but that's fine. You're probably going to want to make this a strong password, as if someone has your server IP address, which is pretty easy to get, they can actually log into your server if they can guess this password, right? Okay, so once we've done that, we'll click create. This is just going to take a second to boot up, and once this is done, I'll be back and we'll go into the next steps. Okay, so that booted up now. So what we're actually going to do is go to this networking tab. You should see this under your server, and I just want to make it clear that you guys don't necessarily only have to have one server here. So while you have this $20 credit, you can create another Linode, and you can use it for whatever you want. You can use those one clicks. You can upload your own images actually if you want to put those on the server. And you can just use it for other things, so don't think you can only have one server. You can have multiple with that $20 credit. Anyways, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the IP address that is here. So it says this under access, SSH access, it says root at, and what we're going to do is just copy this, so whatever this IP address is. I'm going to open up my PuTTY window, which I'm assuming you guys have already downloaded. I'll zoom in on this so you guys can see. And for the host name, we're going to type in the host name that is for our server, so whatever one we found from the Linode website. Then I'm just going to change the text size of this to make it a little bit bigger so that you guys can actually read it while I go through this. So I'm going to change this to 22. And then inside of PuTTY, we're just going to save this as a session. So I actually have Flask App already here. So what I'm going to do is highlight this and hit save. And what that's going to do is save this IP address and save that text size. So every time I go in here, I can just click on Flask App, click load. It will load this IP address for me, load all my settings. I can click open. I can get into that quickly. Good idea to do that. If you guys don't have any here, what you can do is just give this a name, so like hello, hit save, and then it will save it for you. So you can see we have hello now saved like that. Open this up, and when we open this up, we're going to get a warning that says warning, potential security breach. Just click yes, and then we'll be logged in and ready to go. Okay, so what we need to do is log in as the root user. So the username is going to be root. Password is going to be whatever that password is you set when we were setting up this server. And now we should be in here, and we should be ready to start typing some commands and getting some things done. So the first thing that we need to do is actually install Apache on our server. Now, I think that's how you say it, Apache, I don't know the actual name. But anyways, to do that, we're going to start off by just doing a system update to make sure everything's good. So sudo apt update like that. Give this a second, it'll run through, and once that's done, we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we finished that now, and what we're going to do is install Apache. So to do that, we're going to say sudo apt install Apache 2. I believe that's correct. It's going to pop up a thing that says you want to install this, yes or no. We'll hit Y, go ahead and hit enter, wait for this to load, and then again, we'll go into the next step and test that Apache is actually up and running and working okay. All right, so that is finished. Now what we're going to do is just making sure that this worked properly. We're going to type Apache 2-version. If we get some output here that's not an error, so we see the server version and the server build, we are all good to go, and we are ready to move on to the next step, which is actually configuring our firewall. Now, since this is a Linux server, and I guess we're hosting this on linode, by default, most of these have firewalls, and they don't actually let Apache through, so we have to make sure that it's going to go through so that people can access this. So to do that, we're going to check what the services are for our firewall, and then we'll just add the appropriate one. So in this case, we're going to type sudo ufw app list like that, and then you'll see that we have Apache pop up here. You can see these other two. You don't have to worry about those necessarily. What we're going to do is just add this to an allowed service for our firewall. So we're going to say sudo ufw allow, and then single quotation marks Apache like that. Now make sure you type this line exactly. You don't need the full, you don't need the secure. This is fine, and then you should see that the rules are updated, and now this is allowed in the firewall. Okay, so now that we've done that, the next step is just to configure Apache and make sure it's actually running properly. So to do this, we're going to say sudo systemctl, and then I'm just going to look at my other screen to make sure I do this right, status, and then in single quotes, Apache like that. You should see, oh, my apologies on that. So I did single quotes Apache, but I guess I was reading my wrong thing. It's actually going to be Apache 2, and when we do that, so we say sudo ufw, where is that? Sudo systemctl status, Apache 2, not this single quotes Apache. You should see some green text that says active running, and you should get that little green dot there. If you get that, this means it's running, everything's fine, you've completed these steps, we're ready to move forward. Now to get out of this, we're just going to hit Control-C on our keyboard. That should exit out of that, and we'll be ready to move on to the next step, which is to install a few libraries. Now this one's kind of a long line. Again, it'll be in the description, so you guys can just copy it in if you want. But we're going to say sudo apt-get install, and then in this case, lib apache 2-mod -wsgi, and then we're going to do space python-dev. Now I know that was a lot, but essentially what this is going to do is just install some libraries that we need for wsgi, which is kind of how Flask runs. I'm not really an expert on this, so I'm not going to talk too detailed because I don't want to make any, horrible mistakes and mislead you guys. But essentially that was the command right here, sudo apt. We get all that, we'll hit yes, go ahead and continue. Okay, so now we've done most of the setup that we actually need to do, and what we're going to do now is set up a few directories and get into the right area where we're actually going to place our Flask application. Then we'll do a few more configurations, and we should be good to go and actually host this Flask app. So what I'm going to do is cd into var/www/. Now, this is going to bring you to where you need to put your Flask application. Now, I believe you can put this somewhere else, but this is actually, I don't know. I've only ever tried it in this location, so I would recommend put it here. Just follow along with me, get into this directory, and we're actually going to create a few more directories. Now we're going to start by just making a new directory, which is going to be called webApp. Now, if you name this something different, make sure you remember that name, and wherever you see me type webApp, you type that name, okay? So the names here are going to be very important. A big mistake a lot of you guys will have is you name it something different, you forget you name it something different, and then you're going to be using my script, which is referencing this directory. So just make sure, if you want to make sure this works, just name everything the exact same as me. So webApp like that is what I'm going to go with. Now that I have that, I'm going to, actually, I don't need to cd into there right now. Or do I? You know what? Yeah, let's cd into webApp. And now we're going to just install some Python stuff. and then we'll actually be good to go and drag in some files. So what I'm going to do is start by installing Python and pip. So I'm going to say sudo apt-get install, python-pip. So this is going to install pip, make sure that we have that correctly. And then once we have pip, we're actually going to install Flask. We're going to install Flask SQL Alchemy, and then we will have the Python libraries that can actually run our Python code from the Apache web server or whatever it is that's going to be doing that. Okay, so now that we have this, what we're going to do is install Flask, and we're going to install Flask SQL Alchemy. So this is the exact same as we've done in previous tutorials. So pip install Flask like that, wait for that to run through, and then now we're going to do SQL Alchemy. So pip install Flask _ SQL Alchemy like that. And there we go. Once this goes through, we will be good to go. And now we're actually going to bring our Flask app onto this, which is going to involve us using a different piece of software. So I'm going to open up winSCP, which is actually just a file transfer protocol. And what we're going to do is set up a new kind of entry in here, log into our server, and then transfer some files over. This just makes it easier than having to actually copy and paste stuff, because no one really wants to do that. So what we need to get to start is the IP address of our server. So good job I left this open because I forgot. So I'm going to copy that. That's my IP address. I'm going to put it in here. So if you guys are here, you might actually need to click new site. My apologies. You're going to put the host name as whatever your IP address is, the username as root. You can leave the password as blank for now, and then go ahead and hit save. When you do that, it's going to bring up a window. Save this as whatever you want. I'm just going to say test, because I probably will be deleting this after. And then I'm going to go ahead and go in and log in. Now it's going to say update, add, all this stuff. For you, if it just says add, you're going to hit add. For me, I'm just going to go ahead and hit update. And then I'm going to sign in with the correct password. So whatever that password was that you set up as your root password, that's what you need to sign in with. Now you should be in the root directory. We're actually going to go back one directory by we can double click on that thing that's right there. And we're going to go to our www folder, which is going to be under var. So we're going to find all of this. We're going to look for var, which is at the bottom. We're going to go to www, which conveniently is at the bottom as well. And now you should see that we have this folder webApp, which was actually what I had created from the terminal. So what I'm going to do now is open up this folder. And inside here is where I'm actually going to put my Flask application. Now I'm assuming you guys have already created a Flask application. That's why you're going to be deploying one. But there is a few kind of nuances that we have to think about when we do this. So I'm going to find my Flask app. I'll be right back, and then I'll talk about how we add that. Okay, so I found my Flask application. You guys can see these are the files I'm going to be using. So I have my static folder, my templates folder, views, init, and then users.sqlite3. Now, yours might look slightly different than this, obviously, if you created a different Flask app. Things that you have to make sure are the same. You have to make sure that you have a static folder. You have to make sure you have a templates folder, and you have to make sure that the starting point of your application is from init.py. So __init__.py. That needs to be the file that's going to start your application. So just make sure that you have those three constraints. So static, templates, that init file, and then you should be good to go. And so long as this Flask app runs properly and there's no Python errors when you're doing it on your kind of own development side, so not from the server, this will work fine. So I'm going to drag these files into my web app. So it's as easy as that. This is the file transfer just from my Windows Explorer. You can also do it from this left side here, where you can just find the files and transfer them over. This one I find easier. What I'm actually going to do is something weird now, where I create a new folder or a new directory. So like this, and I'm going to call it the exact same thing that I've been calling my other stuff. So in this case, web app. So I'm going to create another folder called web app, and I'm going to take all of these files, so everything that I dragged in, and I'm going to put them inside of that folder. So I guess I could have created that folder first, but regardless, what we're going to have our structure looking like is we have this web app folder. Inside of here, we have another folder called web app, and then inside we have actually our Flask application. And again, that starting file from init.py. I'm really hammering this in because I want to make sure you guys don't mess up this process, because this is where I went wrong a few times before. So again, project directory, web app, another web app folder, your application's inside of there, and we're going to put some other stuff in the outer directory. So now that we've done that, we can close this. And just so you know, if you do want to update your Flask application, the way that you would do it is going into winSCP and then just changing your Python files to update, the new Flask application. Okay, so now that we've installed all the Python packages, what we're going to do is actually set up what we call a new virtual host. Now, I don't really know exactly what this does, to be quite honest with you, but I'm pretty certain that this is just the way that your website is kind of going to be displayed, some settings for it, and this is what Flask needs, so well, that's what we're going to do. So to do this, we need to create a new configuration file inside of a specific directory. What we're going to type is sudo nano, and in this case, I gotta look at my other screen to make sure I don't mess this up, etc/apache2/sites-available, like that, / and now you're going to type the name of your file, which is going to be webApp.conf. Now make sure that this is going to be the same as whatever you've named those folders. So if you name that folder app, then you're going to make sure this is app.conf, okay? It has to be consistent. Now we're going to go ahead and hit enter like that. And now it's going to tell us, oh, this directory does not exist. Well, that would mean I typed this incorrectly. So let me make sure I spell available correctly. My apologies on that. So anyways, take exit out of this, you hit Control X. You can see kind of the commands are down here. This little up means control. I believe on Mac command will work as well. And to save, you're going to hit Control S. Now what we're going to do is copy in a block of code. Now I'm going to take this from my other screen, but I will tell you that this is in the description so you guys can find it. And to paste something into this window, what you do is right click on your mouse. So I'm going to right click and you're going to see that all this code pops up. Again, this is available in the description, so don't worry, you can copy it from there. Now, what you need to do essentially is don't touch anything in this file other than the server IP. Now notice though, when we look through here, everything is referencing what I've named my folder. So in this case, you can see we have wsgi script alias and it's in our directory. So var www, and then you see webApp. That's the name of the folder that we have our application in. And then it has another directory where it actually has webApp, and this is going to run our Python files, right? So inside of here, and you can see all of these different directories, we're referencing the static folder over here. So make sure that if you've named your folder something else, you're going to change all of these to reflect that. So wherever you see webApp, you're going to change that to be whatever you named your folder. Okay, so now that we have server name, what I need to put here is actually the IP address of my server. So I'm going to grab that from linode, which is right here. Again, you guys should already know that because we've seen that. And I'm going to paste that in by just right clicking, and we'll make sure that we keep the spacing consistent and fix that. So to navigate this file, I'm using the arrow keys. And now what I'm going to do is save this by hitting Control S on my keyboard and then exit by hitting Control X. Now we're kind of in the home stretch here. We're almost there. There's only a few more things we need to do. What we're going to do now is actually activate this. So to activate this, we're going to say sudo, and then in this case, a2en site web app. Now this should hopefully activate this. We'll see what we get. It says enabling site web app. To activate the new configuration, you need to run this command. So what we're going to do is run this command. I'm going to copy that, paste that in there. So system reload Apache 2. Once you do that, you should be good. And sorry, that's systemctl, my bad on that. You shouldn't get any output. If that's working, there's no errors, we're good to go. I'm just going to clear the screen and we'll move on to our next steps. So we're actually on the second last step that we need to do here. We need to create now what we call a wsgi file. Now this wsgi file is kind of going to be the starting point of our application, and it's going to lead and kind of import the other Python file that actually stores our main application. Now I know this is kind of confusing, but just follow along with me. We are currently in var www/webapp. Make sure you're in this directory when you're doing this. We're going to create a new file. We're going to say sudo nano, and in this case, we're going to call this file webapp.wsgi. Now notice this has a lowercase a. Now, if you decide to change this name, you'll have to go back to that other folder or that other file that I just modified that had all that text and change where it says webapp.wsgi to be this appropriate name. Okay, so that's why I've recommended you just keep the names the same, but if you're changing them, you're kind of going to have to go in there and fix them for yourself. So let's go ahead and hit enter. And now what we're going to do is type a little bit of Python code. Now I'm actually just going to copy it in to save us some time. Again, this code's all going to be in the description so you guys can grab it. But what we're going to do is copy this and paste this in. Now here, what we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be trying to load in our application from that interior web app folder. And from there, we're going to load that init script and we're actually going to run the application. So that's what this is attempting to do essentially. Now notice that it says from web app import app as application. So this is Python code, but what this is going to do is look at that folder webApp, which is the next folder in the directory. It's going to look for that init.py file, and then from that init.py file, it's going to look for app. Now, app is actually the variable that we've used to store our Flask application. So when you say, and I'll actually just type it here, app equals, and then in this case, Flask like that, it's trying to reference that. So if you've named this variable something different, when you're setting up your Flask application, then you need to change that accordingly in this file. So from webApp import app, well, if your folder name's different, this is obviously going to be different. Same here, right? If your folder name's different, you're going to have to change this ww to be the correct path. And then from app, same thing. If that variable is different, you're going to have to change the name. Now we've referenced this or imported this as an application. And now what we're going to do is set the secret key of our application. So app, add your secret key. You could just leave it like this. I'm just going to make mine tech with Tim. You guys can, again, do whatever you want for the secret key. So tech with Tim. Going to save that file, hit Control X, and we are almost at the moment of truth where we're actually going to start running our application. Now, just notice if I type ls here, you can see kind of the structure that we have. We have webApp, and then we have webApp.wsgi. And if I cd into webApp and do ls, notice that I have that init.py, static, templates, users, views, all of that, okay? So let's cd back. What I'm going to do now is reload Apache, and if everything's gone correctly, our website's actually going to be up and running and we'll be able to visit it. We don't need to run any Python scripts. We should actually be good. So I'm going to say sudo service, and in this case, Apache 2 restart. This will restart the Apache web server, which hopefully should allow us now to configure these changes and then access the website. So we're going to hit enter. No errors, that's always a good sign. So let's grab our IP address from Linode again. And now notice I'm on my main computer, I've gotten out of here. I'm gonna type this in. And when I go to this page and I hit enter, you can see we are directed to our Flask application. So that is essentially how this works. This is how you host the website. This is how we get it up. Now I know I didn't talk about domain register or anything of that. I'm not gonna go into this because it deals with DNS and just all this complicated stuff. And I'm not an expert on getting a domain name up here. But if you are interested in learning how to do the domain stuff, there is tons of tutorials online that can probably teach you how to do this. And now that you have your web application set up and running, all you need to do is just change it so it runs off of your actual domain. So anyways, that has been it for hosting a Flask application. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you leave a like. As always, if you have any questions, leave them down below. And yeah, this is, as easy as it is to get your application up and running on a website.